Hello, everybody. Welcome to this career talk. I'm super excited to introduce Nicole, who's going to talk about her 17 years working at Microsoft. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Just to let you know, we're also streaming on Twitch, and there'll also be a recording of this talk published on our YouTube channel afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora. And thank you everyone who joined today. I'm really excited to talk to you guys. The way that I've laid out these tips is sort of an order of a career and getting a job. So first thing, before you even apply for a job, what should you be doing? Tip number 0 is to do internships and side projects. And congratulations, you're already doing this with your CodeLabs internships that you're doing this summer. Why do internships? Well, you get to learn skills. You get to learn what you like and dislike about different types of jobs. You get to meet people. When you work for companies, you get to make money, and it also builds up your resume. So after my first term of computer science, my resume looked like this. As you can see, my work experience was fairly limited, and my 1A in computer science was not pulling people in, even though I did have this Employee of the Month award when I worked at Wendy's. So back when I was in college, almost, well, I guess over 20 years ago now, to get an internship, I had to print out a piece of paper and a cover letter, staple them together, put them in a separate box. And that first spring, I applied for over 50 jobs and I got 0 interviews. And so it was really important for me to build up my experience. I ended up getting a job because I was one of the last 2 students left, and a late breaking internship came in. And I was able to successfully pass that interview, and I started working at the Esquimalt Naval Base. And so that started to build up my resume. At the end of my computer science degree, I ended up with my degree, but also 2 years of work experience. So even though the internships that I did extended my schooling by a year, I was able to build up a resume and able to get that next set of interviews for a full-time position. Also, right now, a really good thing to be doing is building up your network of mentors. My understanding is through this virtual internship, you have already been paired up with a mentor. So my advice for you, if that relationship and that's gone well, at the end of it, I would encourage you to ask them if they want to continue being your mentor. Another way to find mentors is to ask the people you know if they have any recommendations on people you should be talking to. A great way to introduce yourself is, hey, I was talking to Nicole and she said you were great at algorithms. Would you have 15-20 minutes to talk to me about a problem I'm currently going through? And most people, when you start out with a compliment, will say yes, especially if it's for a short period of time. And these mentors, it'll be one session only. Some you might talk to for a couple of years, and some might be lifelong mentors that you have. Mentors also don't have to necessarily be in the technical field. This goofy picture right here is actually of me and my dad. So my dad was not in technology, but he gave me a ton of great life advice. And so having a variety of mentors can be very helpful. Next, before you have any interview, what should you do? So you should prepare questions and answers. So first of all, you need to do research. So you need to know about the company or the position that you're applying for. So the type of questions you should be asking companies are culture questions. So what's it like to work there? How do people communicate? How do people collaborate? And then also company questions. So what's their business model? What are their challenges? If it's a startup, what is their funding? Again, go back to search and you can find a whole pile of articles and information on what are some great questions to ask. A lot of time when I was interviewing people, the thing that would impress me the most is the questions that they would ask. So it really would make me excited when people were curious and wanted to know more. And it's also really important for you to ask those questions so you know what you're getting into as much as possible. So what about the answers? What type of answers should you prepare? So first of all, you should know why you want to work there. The actual answer doesn't matter, but it should make sense and show your enthusiasm. The other thing you need to be prepared to talk about are projects that you're working on. So for some people, group projects are not something that you look forward to, but I would encourage you to embrace them, especially if there's conflict or challenges and you're able to overcome them. When you are doing interviews, a lot of times you'll get asked of your experience with working in others and how you overcame challenges. Also with the architecture and the technology of your projects, it's really important you're able to explain how, when, what, and why you did stuff. The other type of questions that are in interviews are tech questions. So when you're asked a coding challenge, and the key here is to know your data structures. I am not going to teach you anything about data structures except to tell you need to make sure you know these inside and out, how to reverse them and flip them around and search them. This URL right here will take you to a website that I am not affiliated with, but will give you an overview of all these data structures and some questions. My husband still works at Microsoft. He's a group engineering manager, so he does a lot of interviews. And I was asking him if he had any advice. And one of his pet peeves is that people overuse hash tables a lot. So it's really important to know when and why and the pros and cons of when to use data structures. The other thing that's really important about interviews is to practice. So you can practice on your own, but another really great way to practice is to ask those mentors that you have if they would do a practice interview with you and then give you some honest and unbiased feedback so you can get better before you do the real thing. Next, picking the job. So when I moved around within Microsoft, there was this framework that was shared with me that I found really helpful. It was called the 4 Ps of a job. So when you're thinking about where you want to work next, there's basically this model of you can choose based on product. And so that's the thing that you're going to be working on. The position, so you're going to be a developer, a program manager, a designer, a manager eventually, and the people that you're going to be working with. There's also the 4th P that I like to add in there, if everything is equal, are the perks. And so everyone at every different points in their career will have different things that are important. The reason why I put people at the top and in bold, if you notice that, is because I found that people are the most important part of when I'm working at a job. There's a saying at Microsoft that when people are switching teams is you don't leave teams, you leave your manager. So if you have an excellent manager, the product that you're working on becomes less important. Although, of course, when I was early on in my career, I always wanted to work on the coolest product that existed. Next, after you ace your interviews and you have an offer, make sure you ask for what you want. So this could be negotiating salary or benefits or flexibility. When I first started out working at Microsoft, I was a tester. And I noticed that this was 20 years ago, so not everyone had a laptop. And I noticed that having a laptop in a meeting could be helpful. And so I asked for one and I got one. And people then asked me like, oh, how did you get a laptop? Testers aren't supposed to have laptops. I didn't know that rule. And I had just asked and there was an extra one that wasn't being used. So ask for what you want politely and often you will get it. Also, sometimes you ask for what you want and the answer is no, but sometimes a no can still be really exciting. So several years ago, I was working on a charity auction for my team and we asked Bill Gates to donate 22 minutes of his time. He did say no, but just getting an email from him was very exciting for me. Next, when you are starting a job, what is the first thing that you should do? I would recommend when you're first starting a job is you maximize your benefits. So when you first start maximizing how much you're putting away for retirement, it seems like it's a long way off, but if you're able to do that early on in your career, 20 years after you've been working using the magic of compound interest, you will thank yourself from 20 years ago. So here are some acronym things that you could look into. Each company is going to have different benefits, so you should ask about that. Another thing that I always recommend for people to do is to either teach themselves some financial basics or to hire a fee-only financial advisor. When you have a financial advisor, you want to know how they are incented. Some that work at companies are incented to sell their own products, so that's what they will try to sell you on. But if you have a fee-only financial advisor whose goal is to keep you happy and to keep you on as a client, that's a great way to go. It will feel expensive, but over a long run, getting set up, especially at the beginning, it can be super helpful. The only other money tip that I will give you is if you're looking to invest in something, pick low price index funds, especially or compared to investing in individual stocks, unless you want to do all the research and keep up on that. I'm definitely a lazy investor, so low price index funds and letting it sit for a long time is the way that I've gone. Okay, so now you're actually doing the job. Here are some on-job productivity tips. The first one is to make a list. I love lists, as you can probably tell how I'm doing this presentation, which is a big list of tips. My best days are when I wake up, I make a list, I prioritize it, I figure out what's most important, and then I go and get some epic shit done. One of the things that's happened in 2020, we all know, is schools and work have all changed because of the global pandemic. And so when I was getting really stressed out at the beginning, I started making lists with my kids too. And here's an example of what I did. And this just really helped to calm me and to settle me and to give me something to focus on. I also found a lot of times when I was working, there was so much stuff swirling around in my head, and writing it down and getting it out there and sort of trusting that I've documented means I could stop thinking about it and just focus on the thing that I was doing at that point in time. List technology. It does not matter what type of technology you use, as long as it works for you. So here, this is a Post-it note. It could be a paper. It could be an app. It could be whatever you want. Just the fact that it's documented somewhere is important. Next, focus on the essential. You'll notice that list that I had before had quite a few things on it. One book that I read recently was called Essentialism, and this next diagram was really impactful for me. It basically looked at your energy. And if you have your energy and you're doing 50 different things and it's pulling you in 50 different directions, you make very little progress on a whole pile of things. But imagine you pick that thing that's essential in your life or in your job, and you put basically all your energy in that, and how far that can move things. Next, have a 22-minute meeting. So this is sort of like the ad in my talk for another talk that I have. You can search for it on YouTube if you're interested. But the gist of this, once you start working, a lot of times people will complain about inefficient meetings or boring meetings or meetings that are not useful. So these tips here really help. The main thing to focus on for meetings is making sure you have a goal-based agenda. Like, so why are we getting together? And then being efficient at it. And a lot of the efficiency is the responsibility of the person setting up the meeting. So it might take you some extra time, but it'll help everyone else have a productive one. Next, for all communication, make it shorter. I love this quote where someone's talking about writing a shorter letter, but they didn't have the time. When we want people to read or listen or understand what we're saying, having it be shorter is really, really important. This is emails and messages and presentations. It's also about user experience when you're building products, making the strings and the information that people have to consume as absolutely short as possible. You basically want to, the communications that are most important, you want to make them as short as possible, where you literally cannot cut anything more from them. Another email tip is to know when to send things. One pet peeve of mine is when people would send an email at like 5 p.m. asking people to do things. By the time Monday morning rolls around, that email is pushed to the bottom. I found the best time to email people is 9:47 on a Tuesday. Try it out. Next, focusing on quality over quantity. I worked on one team and I was just brand new there, and they gave me one project the first year and I absolutely aced it and got a great review. The second year, they kept asking me to take on more and more projects. And so I said yes. And so my workload, or the number of things I was doing, was building up. So instead of knocking it out on the park, there was projects that I didn't do as well on. And what I felt was, from my experience, having like the one or two things that you're doing really well as a whole pile of things where you're struggling to maintain a high quality, that I definitely focus on the quality over the quantity. This can also apply to products, where you're deciding how many features or what functionality to put in there. And my suggestion would always be to have high quality features and functionality before you add a whole pile that you can't maintain the quality of. Next, I want you to join a cult. It's called the Cult of Done. And don't worry, there's no meetings or fees or donations that are needed. It's a list of basically mottos that help get over procrastination. So when I was in college, I was a master procrastinator, which caused a lot of stress. However, it was really, whenever I had a big project due in a couple of days, it was the only time my apartment would be clean, because that's when I would decide I'd have to not work on the project because I needed to clean. So slightly productive. But really, procrastinating gets in the way of being done. The two things that I want to call out here that really inspire me is pretending you know what you're doing is almost the same as knowing what you're doing. So just accept that you know what you are doing, even if you don't, and do it. And the next one is laugh at perfection. It's boring and keeps you from being done. And I think this is totally true. A lot of times I'm nervous about something and I'm not going to do a good job at it. And so I end up not doing it and delaying it. And then it doesn't actually end up being a good job. So if you want to read these or get this, you can search Cult of Done and you'll find the blog post that was written about that. So on the job people tips. So there's the technology aspect of work, there's the productivity aspect of work, but often it's working with other people that can be the most challenging. First off, in order for people, when you want people to like you, you need to genuinely like them first. If you go into any introduction, meeting, or conversation with someone and be like, this is a person that I'm going to like, and have that energy come out, it'll be really helpful for you. The other thing is, if you want to seem like an interesting person, instead of talking about yourself and all the interesting things you've done, be interested in the other person and ask them questions, and go really deep in understanding what makes them tick. These work relationship tips also work in outside of work as well. So in romantic and friendships and all that type of stuff. Next, assume most reasonable intentions. So sometimes when I was working at Microsoft, I would be working with someone. I'm like, oh, that person is crazy and doing weird things. And why are they doing this? And I learned this concept of, when you find someone who's crazy, to assume most reasonable intentions. So most people are working towards what they think is the right thing. So I had this one situation where this woman and I are working together, and we were just butting heads all the time. And we eventually got into a room together and we listed out our priorities. So we were working together, but we had different management chains. And we realized that our priorities were exactly the opposite of each other. So my highest priority was her lowest priority. Now, having that knowledge didn't actually fix the situation, but it fixed our understanding of the situation. And so it was very helpful. Next, when you get feedback, accept it as a gift and embrace it. So back when I was working on MSN Messenger, I had this feature and I was getting a lot of praise for it because it was going to increase the number of search clicks that I got. Looking back on it, it was probably one of the worst features I designed, but I was getting a lot of positive praise for it. But one engineer realized, this is not good. But the way that he gave me the feedback was very passive aggressive. He updated his status message about it. And so I dismissed it without even considering it. And what I should have done is actually thought about it more, even though he didn't deliver it in a great way, because it was really good feedback. The other thing, the feedback that I give about feedback is not all feedback is going to be something where you need to change or adjust to. The thing that's important about it is thinking about it. When I was early on in my career and we would be reviewing features and I was getting feedback on it, I felt feedback was sort of like personal and I was trying to defend all my decisions. And as I grew in my career, I realized my job wasn't to have the best idea, but to figure out what the best ideas were by my starting point and everyone else's feedback. And that mind shift really helped me to grow, but then also to make better products. So after you've been working for a year, here are some things to consider. Giving back. So one of the things that I think that's so fantastic about the tech industry is they're flexible jobs, they're fun jobs, and they can be very financially rewarding jobs. So once you are established, having that ability to give back to whatever is important to you, I think is really valuable. And giving back could be donating money, and it could also mean donating or using your time to help others. Just like having a mentor is important, being a mentor is really important, especially if you want to be a manager. The best way to learn is to mentor others. And when you're mentoring others, it's all like the best parts of management without any of the paperwork. So I'd give a shout out to doing that. Next, this is a pet peeve of mine. Do not lose vacation days. So when I was working at Microsoft, we get a set number of weeks each year and we could only carry over so many. So there was people at Microsoft who would lose vacation days. Another way to say that is they were working for a big billion-dollar company for free. If you love working and you're fine working for free, I would encourage you to volunteer your time to other organizations. The other thing that's popular now for tech companies is to have unlimited vacation. That doesn't mean you don't work for 365 days a year. One thing I would recommend doing is figuring out for yourself how many vacation days you should take when you first start out. 3 weeks is sort of a standard one in the industry. And then make sure you take those. One of the things that I always worry about for the unlimited vacations is that people end up taking no vacations. And that's not good for your I guess, self-growth and sanity. I also think having time away from work can help you improve at work and just having new and a variety of experiences. Okay. And forever, one thing that I love doing is reading great books. These great books here, you can find them at this URL if you're interested, are books that throughout my career have helped me change roles or learn something or have been entertaining. Everyone's going to have a different set of books that they enjoy. This URL, I don't get any money if you buy any of these books, and I have not written them, but I do have a few friends that have written books in this set that I've really enjoyed and have been impactful for me. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions now.
Awesome. It looks like we have a lot of questions already in the Q&A box.
Great. I'll take a look at that. Okay, the first one I see, how do I find mentors outside of CodeLabs in the future? I might have mentioned this when I was talking, but if you have a mentor in CodeLabs, I would recommend asking them, hey, I would like to find new mentors, and then introducing yourself to them. So using your network to grow your network. Some of these will work out and some of them won't, and that's okay. I'm a high schooler, and how much, I'm a high schooler, and how much does college reputation impact getting a job? Does graduating from an Ivy League give you more offers than state universities? That is a great question. I do think college reputation matters for getting the interview along with experience. I think once you're in the interview process, your resume doesn't matter as much, right? Because that's sort of the door into that. I think there's a lot of trade-offs from going to the Ivy League schools. So when I grew up in Canada, I went to the University of Victoria. Um, the way I grew up and my family, I would have not have been able to afford to go to one of those Ivy League schools. And I think that's totally okay as well. I think focusing on your experience and what you're doing yourself is another way to boost your resume, as we talked about at the beginning. Hi, and working with team members, how can you ask them to do their part when you've tried everything you can think of, such as letting them know you're able to answer questions, meet online? What do you do when they're still not doing their work and it all ends up on your plate? Well, I guess this is for working with a school group or a project. I think depending on what you want to do for that project, sometimes you have to pick up that work and complete it. I would probably in the future try not to work with those folks again. There's only so much you can do if someone's not interested. Depending on the school situation or the works, if this was like a work situation, I would talk to my manager or my advisor just to let them know, like, hey, I'm not getting the support from the other team members. One of the things is you can't make people do anything. The thing that you can control is what you do yourself. So I think it sounds like you've done a great job trying to use a whole pile of techniques. The other thing that you could do is talk to your mentor and give them sort of the specific things you've tried to do and see if there's anything else that you can do there. Okay. In your career, is there something you wish you did differently? Oh, whoops, sorry. Something that you wish you did differently or known earlier? Well, I tried to put as many of those things in the tips. I think maxing out my 401k even earlier would have been important from a financial perspective. But from a career perspective, I think the thing that I was talking about with the feedback and really embracing it instead of being like, no, here's why I'm right. Here's why I'm right. Here's why I'm right. But really taking time to listen to people. Another thing with feedback that I do sometimes is I have this term where I say, oh, thank you for that. That's interesting. I'm going to noodle on it. And what noodle on it, another word for that would be to think about it, but it's to really let it sit for a couple of days and not feel like I have to respond immediately. Sometimes just letting something roll around in my head while I'm sleeping or going for a walk or thinking about it in the shower can really help, as opposed to like having to answer things immediately. As a mother employee in the tech industry, how do you manage your time? This was really hard for me when my kids were really young. My kids are 11 and 13 now, but when they were like 3 and 1, it was a real struggle when I was working. It felt sometimes like I was failing as a mom, as a wife, as an employee, as a friend, as just like my own individual human being. One of the things that I did, and is not always available, is I ended up working part-time. So instead of working 5 days a week, I worked 4 days a week and had my salary reduced by 20%. And it was the best salary change that I ever had because it really gave me that time to focus on work for those 4 days, focus on personal things on that Friday that I had off. My kids were still in childcare on that Friday. And then also them being able to do family things in the evening and the weekend. So it is hard. Everyone has the same amount of time, and you really need to figure out what your priorities are and then put that time around them. How do I keep in touch with past mentors? Do I keep updating them on my current projects? Yes, that is one great idea. You could also, some mentors, you schedule like a chat once a month. Some it's every 3 months or 6 months or a year. You could have a list of all your mentors and the last time you connected with them, and then when you want to connect with them again. When I have mentors, sometimes if I see an article or something interesting that I come across that I think they would be interested in for some reason, I let them know. I think some mentors will, like we talked about, or I talked about before, will be a short time thing, and some of them they might last for a lifetime, and that's okay. It's also okay to go and talk to people that you haven't talked to for a really long time. The worst thing that they can do is not reply to you. Another thing with mentors to build up that relationship is to be appreciative of their time. So every time you have a conversation, to follow up with a thank you and a piece of information, or I followed your advice about talking to Nicole, and this is what happened. Thank you very much. That can be helpful as well. Oh, if you could recommend a book that would help someone stop procrastinating, what would you recommend? Asking for a friend, of course. Oh, you're very nice to ask for your friend. I would suggest not reading a book and start doing the thing that you are procrastinating on. Seriously, check out the Cult of Done blog post. It's like 13 steps, and I just found it so inspiring to me. So hopefully it would be inspiring for you too. Do you have any recommendations on how to take next steps from feedback? How do you minimize backlash and stop from taking criticisms personally? I guess one of the things that I like doing, it depends on how you receive the feedback, but again, thanking the person who sent you the feedback, and then taking the time to decide what you're going to do with it, and then let them know. So maybe you say, I loved your feedback, I'm going to go into that direction, or thank you for your feedback, I'm not going to do that, and here are the reasons why, but I understand where you're coming from. I'm not sure I understand the part about the, whoops, that question went away in my UI, about the backlash, but I think just not taking it personal is, I guess it depends on what the feedback's on. It could be personal or about your style. All humans communicate and work in different ways. I've worked for managers that I have not got along with, but other people have just like loved working with. So not every human being and team is going to be that perfect fit. And then just not taking it personal. It's just your work is not you, and you want to have the best work product possible. So instead of defending a decision and it's like you're representing yourself, it's like, okay, I want to make the best post-it note possible. And if Billy's giving me feedback that these corners should be round, I should consider it and not be necessarily defending that. Okay. I often feel insecure about my own lack of knowledge, especially compared to all the kids who started coding at 12. How do I get over this insecurity, and will impact me if I didn't really start coding until the end of high school, beginning of college? I didn't start coding till the end of high school as well. I took one computer science class in school. I think it's about having that practice and that experience. So having the internships are great. And if you aren't able to do those internships, having those side projects. And I would focus less about comparing yourself with everyone else and focus on your own growth and the things that you can control. And it's totally okay to start coding in high school or in college or even after college. What to do in university to maximize job offers? Again, if you can, do internships and do side projects. So have that resume, which is your education plus experience, is just so helpful. What should I do if I have too much on my plate? I feel this need to continue working hard, but I'm also scared of the workload. So I've been procrastinating a lot. And that's really hard because procrastinating means the workload is just piling up. I would recommend you read the book Essentialism that I was talking about before. If there's too much on your plate, you have to get some stuff off your plate. And so you have to prioritize what this is. And also getting that over that procrastination hump is really good. The other thing is, if you're procrastinating on something, is asking yourself, why are you procrastinating on it? Is it because you don't want to do it? Is it because you're scared you're not going to do it well enough? Getting to that root is really hard. But if there's too much on your plate, you have to get some stuff off or we can't make bigger plates, right? We only have so much time.
If you don't mind me chiming in, there's a question from our stream that came in, and I can read it
Oh,
out
sure.
to you.
Yeah, sure.
I live in a small town in Texas. How do I overcome the idea of being rejected from jobs due to the lack of experience when I'm not able to get the experience due to the rejections? I'm grateful for CodeLabs in giving me the first chance of many applications. I was starting to get discouraged.
Yeah, that can be really hard. I totally understand. Like I was talking about when I first was applying for internships, I applied for like 50 and got no interviews. So I'd say don't give up. One of the other things too, and people do this a lot in the publishing industry, is setting different goals for yourself. So again, you can't control what's going to happen, but you can set a goal where you say, I'm going to apply for 50 things. And so you can feel successful when you do that. Of course, you want to have that successful moment as well. And I think this virtual internship that everyone here is doing, I think that's so perfect. And you can also work on your side projects. So that could be an app or a website, or you could contribute to an open source project. So you start to have that experience yourself. Yeah, don't give up. My town that I came from was fairly small too. So you can do it. Okay, I think I answered that one. How did you get to Microsoft? What was your journey? So I grew up in Duncan, BC on Vancouver Island, and I loved computers. I gravitated to that a lot. When I started at the University of Victoria, I either wanted to do physics, chemistry, math, or computer science. Physics, I was so disappointed in because in our labs, we measured gravity by rolling a marble down a ramp. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we know what gravity already is. I was excited about chemistry because I was like, ooh, I get to put all these things together and see what happens. But the first year labs are more like baking, where they give you the exact recipe and you have to write numbers down. So that was fairly boring to me. And then computer science, I found it very, very creative. So we were given a project and we were able to write whatever we want to achieve that outcome. And then I've been harping on this a lot about doing internships, but this woman came into one of my first year classes and talked about the internship program there. And I was just blown away, where I could go and work and get paid and build up my resume and have fun. So that's something that really brought me into there. So for Microsoft, my second to last internship, I was working at a startup in England. And my first mistake was I didn't realize that when you're in England, you get paid every 4 weeks. And I was at the point where I barely had any money in my bank account. And then payday finally came around, and this small company emailed everyone and was like, oh, we're running short on cash, so we can't pay everyone this month. And I was terrified because it was one of the first times that I didn't feel secure. I was very far away from my family. They probably could have sent me money, but I just was like, I do not want to have this feeling again. So I'm going to work for Microsoft. I really didn't know anything about Microsoft at that point in time, except it was a big software company and I knew they could pay me. When I went back to school, Microsoft had posted an internship. And so I applied for that, and I was really lucky that I got to work there. And over the summer, I just absolutely loved it. So I returned. When I started at Microsoft, I was a software test engineer. That doesn't really exist anymore. It's sort of combined with engineering now. But the thing that I really loved the most about my role was giving feedback on the designs of features as opposed to just testing them. And so I decided to switch over to program management. So that's what I did for the bulk of my career. Does it matter what kind of side projects you do? What is considered impressive? I think any side project is impressive. I don't think it matters what kind it is. I would pick something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy working on. And then being able to talk about, here's the architecture, here's the technology, here's why I did it. But the actual thing, I don't think matters. I would do the thing that you want to work on. So the thing that brings you joy. So I think that's all of the questions. That if there's any more, I'm happy to do that. I also have 3 bonus tips that I can talk about. So Cora, are you aware of any other questions?
I don't think so right now. I guess we can go on to the bonus tips.
Okay, bonus tips. Let's see if I can get back to my screen. There we go. So this one I put at the end. I don't know if we get to it, but time after you work in tech for a while, you realize that your time is more precious than money. And so thinking about ways how you can trade off one for the other. I talked a little bit about how I had worked part-time. My family has also at times have hired cleaners or used grocery delivery services. So when you're starting to feel like that feeling of, there's too much on your plate, I'm feeling overwhelmed, consider trading this off. And this took me a while to get over paying for some of these things just from the way that I grew up. But you'll realize over time that, time is this finite resource that you have. And when you're working in tech, especially if you are successful, and I expect all of you will be, you'll come to understand that. Next, one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to take an improv class. So improv is where you get up on stage and you play goofy games and you get suggestions. There's a lot of fun that happens there, but there's actually a lot of learning that also happens at how to interact with people, how to be positive, how to make others look good. It's just so much fun. And I think there's some fundamental great things there. It also really helps if you want to work on presentation skills and talking in front of people, because communication is such an important part of a tech job that even if you only do a few improv classes, it'll build up that courage and that experience being in front of others and talking, even if you're talking about some goofy things. And then this last one, so this is my favorite Venn diagram I've ever found. It's find your reason for being. So it's a Japanese concept. And I just looking at these different circles and really thinking about how your role in your career can fill them. So what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And for some people, they know this really early on, and that's fantastic. But then there's people like me who are still working on what that is and jumping through different parts of this. So thinking about this is really, really important. Okay, that was the bonus tips.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It looks like, unfortunately, we've run out of time.
Oh, okay.
But luckily, we actually got through all the questions too. So that was awesome. I want
Awesome.
to thank everyone, especially Nicole, for being here. Thank you for everyone who asked questions. And have a wonderful day.
Okay, thanks everyone. I hope this helped.